Stealth bombers scorch across the sky. Missiles rain down, destroying everything of importance all over China. The Chinese military is in full panic mode because there's nothing they can do to prevent it. This is what happens when B-21 raiders attack China. That scenario is the focus of an amazing CGI simulation on the MilSim-K channel, which specializes in high-quality and realistic simulations of military clashes. The video showcases the destructive power and next-level maneuverability of the world's first 6th-generation military aircraft. The B-21 has been touted by some to change the global balance of power, especially around Taiwan and the South China Sea. So to say the US's adversaries, particularly China, are taking the threat very, very seriously is an understatement. We'll delve into how the Chinese are scrambling to react to the B-21 and why they're so concerned a bit later. But first, what happens in the simulation when a squadron of B-21s is unleashed to attack the Chinese mainland? The confrontation starts when the Chinese military conducts a provocative large-scale military demonstration in and around the Taiwan Strait. Picking up the massive military buildup via its network of spy satellites, the US dispatches an aircraft carrier group to monitor the situation. The People's Liberation Army, or PLA for short, decides to take the initiative and fires a large barrage of DF-21 missiles at the US Navy aircraft carrier group from the row of transport erector launchers, or TELs, it's assembled on the shore. The DF-21, short for Dongfeng 21, is a family of Chinese medium-range road-mobile ballistic missiles developed in China, also known by their NATO reporting name CSS-5 Dongfeng. In 2013, the DF-21D variant was successfully tested against a ship target roughly the size of a US aircraft carrier, and in 2016, the US Department of Defense revealed a new nuclear variant, the DF-21E, also known as CSS-5 Mod 6. The sudden DF-21 attack panics the US Navy group, which attempts evasive maneuvers and fires off interceptor missiles. Fortunately, it's difficult for ballistic missiles to hit moving targets, and the Navy aircraft carrier narrowly escapes being hit. The barrage of DF-21s falls harmlessly into the sea. Enraged, the US Navy prepares a counterattack, and 4 hours later, it's showtime. A squadron of B-21 bombers from the US 8th Air Force swoops down ominously on the Fujian coast of China. The Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider is the successor to the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, and a significant upgrade too. It's a long-range stealth intercontinental strategic bomber able to deliver conventional and thermonuclear weapons, but also able to function as an intelligence collection platform, battle manager, and interceptor aircraft. Although many of the details are still classified since the aircraft is still in development and testing, it's known to have a length of 54 feet, a wingspan of 132 feet, an empty weight of 70,000 pounds, a maximum takeoff weight of around 180,000 pounds, and a weapons load capacity of around 20,000 pounds, with a maximum speed of at least Mach 0.8 or just under the speed of sound. The B-21's large and diverse payload of bombs and missiles is expected to include the JASSM-ER cruise missile, GBU-57 bunker-destroying bomb, and GBU-31 JDAM satellite-guided bomb. The aircraft's stealth capabilities have been significantly enhanced, making it harder for adversaries to detect. These improved capabilities include curved surfaces and the use of radar-absorbent materials to reduce its radar cross-section. The B-21 also likely employs advanced electronic emissions control systems to minimize its electronic signature, allowing it to spoof adversary radars and disguise itself as another object. It was conceived primarily as a way to breach China's supposedly impenetrable Anti-Access Area Denial or A2AD shield, and to begin ground strikes to take out sensitive targets in case of a conflict. After 8 years of development and testing, and tens of billions of dollars in research and development, in the simulation the B-21 is finally ready for real-world combat action. The first targets are the cornerstone of China's air defense grid, its high-tech military radar installations. By some accounts, the B-21 has a radar signature the size of a golf ball. Others say it's the size of a mosquito. Either way, even with their air defenses fully intact, the B-21 already gives the PLA nightmares trying to track it, let alone attempt to defend against it. With its vaunted radar tracking systems turned to smoldering scrap metal, China's air defenses lie in tatters. The next target is China's array of anti-air missile launchers, already significantly compromised by the destruction of their radar systems that guide the missiles. Massive explosions light up the Chinese countryside as the B-21s pummel China's TELs and other missile launch systems. But before all the anti-air defenses can be neutralized, some missiles are still launched and hurtle towards the B-21s. The B-21s detect, outmaneuver, and then destroy the incoming missiles before obliterating the remaining launchers. China's air defenses are comprehensively breached, but they're not quite done yet. Frantically, they scrambled J-10 fighters into action from Huzhou in Zhejiang province. Undeterred, the B-21s shoot over Zhejiang and head for Anhui. With a range of over 14,000 kilometers, the B-21 can strike anywhere in China. They reach Anqing City in Anhui province, home of one of China's largest air force bases. Streams of GBU-31 2,000-pound guided missiles are launched from the B-21's missile bays. The base doesn't stand a chance and goes up in flames as the missiles strike. Now the Chinese authorities panic completely. Air raid alert sirens start sounding all over the country. The squadron of B-21s leaves Tianjin and streaks towards Beijing, China's vast and densely populated capital. With its radar destroyed, there's no way for China to detect the approaching bombers and take defensive action. Another barrage of GBU-31s is launched. Massive explosions rock the city as China's munitions factories are hit by the bombs. The next targets are government buildings. The sky is filled with the sight and sound of American missiles flying towards their targets and explosions as they hit them. All facilities known or suspected to be Chinese Communist Party or CCP premises are attacked. While Beijing is engulfed in flames, the B-21s leisurely fly over and survey their handiwork. The Chinese J-11 fighters dispatched to defend against the B-21s unknowingly find themselves exposed to their foe above the East China Sea. The Shenyang J-11 or Jan-11 is a Chinese multi-role fighter aircraft that is a licensed-built variant of the Russian Sukhoi Su-27 SK fighter. Its NATO codename is Flanker. It's a highly maneuverable fighter aircraft capable of conducting air superiority and ground attack missions and is armed with a 30mm GSH-31 cannon. The aircraft is capable of carrying a wide range of missiles, including the PL-12 radar-guided air-to-air missile, PL-9 short-range infrared homing air-to-air missile, PL-8 air-to-air missile, Vympel-R-77 medium-range air-to-air missile, Vympel-R-27 medium to long-range air-to-air missile, and Vympel-R-73 short-range air-to-air missile. It also has an unguided rocket launcher and free-fall cluster bombs. However, all of that capacity is to no avail, because the B-21 has the ability to engage fighters as well. They launch a battery of AIM-120 missiles, which sear through the sky towards the J-11s. The AIM-120 AMRAAM is a high-performance, all-weather, beyond visual range, air-to-air missile developed by Raytheon. Once launched, the missile guides itself to the target using inertial guidance and updates via data link from the launch aircraft. It has a maximum speed of Mach 4 and excellent endgame maneuverability, making it difficult for targets to evade. It also boasts a home-on-jam guidance mode to counter electronic jamming, along with a self-guiding terminal mode using its own monopulse radar set. With a range of 20 to 30 nautical miles and a 40-pound high-explosive blast fragmentation warhead, the AIM-120 is a highly capable and reliable air-to-air missile that packs a serious punch. The AIM-120s hunt down their opponents, and seconds later, 3 of the 4 Chinese jets burst into flames as the missiles hit them. The remaining J-11 decides that discretion is the better part of valor, turns tail, and flees for its life. Satisfied, the B-21s turn around and head back to base at the end of an extremely successful mission. A raid like this would be a massive blow to China, not just due to the extensive damage done to its military, industrial, and administrative capacity, but also to its ambitions to match the US as a global power, especially in Far Eastern Asia. Chinese military planners are wary of the B-21 providing a massive propaganda victory for the US. Even a tactically prominent victory for the B-21 will deflate China's aura of technologically rivaling the United States, demonstrating for all to see what is supposedly invincible stealth fighters, unbreakable A2AD so-called Great Wall, allegedly impenetrable integrated air defense network, and a larger navy than that of the US could not stop US bombers from striking the Chinese mainland. This would derail the narrative with which China is wooing the global south, that it has metamorphosed from a poor third-world overpopulated mess into a prosperous, advanced, and powerful state, well on its way to unseating the ruling hegemon, namely the US. But just how realistic is the scenario described in the simulation, and what can China do to counter the threat? Well, firstly, the B-21 is still being tested at Edwards Air Force Base, California, and the first units are only due for delivery in 2027. This simulation is still very much hypothetical. Both the US and Chinese sides seem to agree that given the current status quo, it will take a significant number of B-21s to pose an existential threat to China. For this reason, the US intends to ultimately have a fleet of at least 150 B-21s, with both the US Air Force and China assessing the number needed to be able to get past China's defenses and cause serious damage on the Chinese mainland to be around 100. As it currently stands, most experts, whether American, Chinese, Russian, or neutral, are of the opinion that when it comes to the South China Sea and the waters and airspace over and around China, the Chinese hold a significant home advantage over the US. Former US Navy Indo-Pacific Command Chief Admiral Harry Harris and his successor Admiral Phil Davidson have both voiced their concerns before the Senate Armed Services Committee about the ability of China's ground-based missiles to threaten US aircraft carriers and bases in the Indo-Pacific region due to their superior range, speed, and sensor performance. And in a Stimson Center webinar in 2022, US Marine Corps Assistant Commandant General Eric Smith admitted that logistics to sustain a long, drawn-out conflict in East Asia is another handicap for the US. Coupled with China's vast and multifaceted anti-air defense systems, these are the main reasons why even war games conducted by Western think tanks like the RAND Corporation and the Center for Strategic and International Studies do not result in conclusive victories for the US. The B-21 forms an important part of US initiatives to try and place itself in a more advantageous position facing off against China by introducing a series of innovative new concepts of military operations. These include the Force Designed 2030 Expeditionary Advanced Base of Operations, or EBO for short, Distributed Maritime Operations known as DMO, and Ghost Fleet Overlord. The idea is for small, mobile, and hard-to-detect marine littoral combat regiments placed on friendly, nearby islands to threaten Chinese shipping with long-range missiles. The US Navy's unmanned surface vessels will take the heat off its crewed vehicles, allowing them to focus on larger fleet-level operations. These plans also include the Rapid Dragon concept, which involves using workhorse cargo planes and tankers like the C-130J Hercules, MC-130 Commando II, and C-17 Globemaster III to release dozens of missiles packed in large pellets from their main doors mid-air, overwhelming Chinese radars, sensors, and kill chains. The B-21 plays an important role in this overall strategy to compromise and get through China's comprehensive, and at least for the meantime, intimidating anti-access area denial defense strategy and setup. The B-21 will be able to break through China's defenses and begin a ground strike operation to destroy critical enemy installations, command and control, and radar centers, like in the simulation. With its long-range, low observability, and nuclear capability, it's designed to be utilized on day one of a potential conflict scenario with China, greatly reducing the time it would take to respond to a crisis anywhere in the Indo-Pacific region. So what are the Chinese defenses that the B-21 would have to get past to cause the damage that it was designed to inflict? As suggested in the simulation video, there are four main components to Chinese defenses that the B-21 will have to overcome in order to successfully conduct a raid on the Chinese mainland. The first component is distance, the easiest of the four for the B-21 to overcome. The Chinese strategy of building long-distance missiles with long range beyond what the US and its allies have to offer in response, and placing these missiles on man-made islands at an increasing distance from their shores, creates quite an effective deterrent against encroaching US naval and air assets. But as mentioned earlier, the B-21's flight range of around 14,000 kilometers means that even if launched from the continental US, within a matter of hours the aircraft will be over Chinese airspace. They can be refueled in the air if needs be, and if launched from Guam or the Philippines, it would engage the enemy even faster. The second and arguably most important component is China's high-tech network radar system. Despite the B-21's minuscule radar signature, some of China's radar capacity might still be able to detect the B-21's approach, especially when the planes are refueling. In this regard, the state-of-the-art YLC-8E Chinese anti-stealth radar system, touted as the flagship of Chinese stealth radar, looks like a tricky opponent to get past undetected. The YLC-8E provides UHF-band 3D surveillance with full coherent digital pulse compression and moving target detection technology. Some sources even claim that the YLC-8E uses quantum particles for target detection, although this is just speculation at this point. Its gigantic antenna array, coupled with advanced information processing technology and AI capabilities, allows it to detect and track aircraft over 500 kilometers away and missile threats up to 700 kilometers away. With a propelled chassis providing high mobility and strong anti-jamming capability, it looks like a formidable early warning system, and it remains to be seen whether the B-21's advanced stealth characteristics will be sufficient to not only slip past the YLC-8E undetected, but destroy China's stock of these systems. The third component of China's defenses that the B-21s will have to deal with is China's vast and multi-layered missile defense system, based on the ground, at sea, and even fired from its fighters and bombers. These include the integration of Russia's formidable S-400 system. The latest missiles for the S-400 have a range of 249 miles, but they can also fire medium and short-range missiles, allowing them to engage at multiple ranges. China also has its homegrown HQ-9, roughly equivalent to Russia's S-300, which is a long-range surface-to-air missile capable of engaging a wide range of aerial targets, including aircraft, helicopters, unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs, cruise missiles, air-to-ground missiles, guided bombs, and ballistic missiles. With a top speed of around Mach 4, a flight ceiling of around 30 miles, and a range of around 150 miles, the HQ-9 can conceivably be a big problem for the B-21, provided that Chinese radar and communication systems are intact and enough of them are fired. The last and potentially most hazardous component of Chinese air defenses the B-21 will have to vanquish in order to inflict maximum damage to the Chinese mainland is the PLA Air Force's fleet of stealth fighters, which is currently being upgraded in a major way. Plus, they have their own state-of-the-art stealth bomber, the H-20, currently in production. When it comes to their stealth fighter capabilities, it's already debatable whether the B-21 will be able to compete with China's fourth-generation J-10 and J-11 stealth fighters, or even the higher-spec Shenyang J-15, as nonchalantly as in the simulation video. So it's likely that they'll have an even tougher time up against the fifth-generation J-20, nicknamed the Mighty Dragon, and brand-new stealth combat aircraft, the J-31B. Defense journal Janes has reported that in the 11 months leading up to July 2023, the PLA Air Force incorporated over 70 new J-20s, bringing the total to approximately 195 aircraft as of May 2024. These are spread across 12 air brigades, with 3 fully outfitted with the J-20. The J-31B looks to be a substantial upgrade on China's current workhorse, the J-15, and can be seen more or less as an equivalent to the US's F-35. It can carry an assortment of munitions such as the PL-10 and PL-15 air-to-air missiles, various guided bombs, and air-to-ground missiles, and has weapons bays on both sides which can carry 2 missiles each, increasing its capabilities in close-range fighting. It also features AESA, or Active Electronically Scanned Array radar, an electro-optical targeting system, and a helmet-mounted display system. Then there's China's first attempt at a 5th or 6th generation stealth bomber, the Xi'an H-20. Currently, very little is known about this aircraft, which was first announced back in 2016, but has been shrouded in secrecy ever since. In March 2024, Newsweek cited a Chinese official as saying the H-20 would be ready soon, as there were no longer any major challenges left for the development. It's believed to be a modification of the American B-2 Spirit bomber, which of course is being replaced in the US Air Force by the B-21. In a paper published in the peer-reviewed journal Acta Aeronautica et Astronautica Sinica in October 2023, a Chinese research team found in a simulated wargame that the H-20 would come out on top in a duel between the B-21 and H-20, thanks to the unpredictable trajectory of the H-20's missiles. However, the US Department of Defense, at least officially, has utterly dismissed the threat posed by the H-20. A Defense Department intelligence official speaking to reporters on the condition of anonymity was reported by Defense One as saying, "The thing with the H-20 is when you actually look at the system design, it's probably nowhere near as good as US low observable platforms, particularly more advanced ones that we have coming down. They've run into a lot of engineering design challenges in terms of how do you actually make that system capability function in a similar way to a B-2 or B-21. The same official also cast doubt on Chinese claims that their bomber is coming soon, saying it could still be many years away, and that even if the bomber is unveiled, it doesn't mean that it would have the kind of capability that they would need, or the quantity that they would need. This is the same argument one might expect the Chinese military brass to be making about the B-21, and to some extent that's exactly what the initial response to the B-21 has been. That said, reading between the lines, they're definitely worried. The scramble to implement new radar, new missiles, new stealth fighters, and even a 6th-generation stealth bomber of their own indicates their concern is very real and very urgent. In a 2023 case study for CASI, Derek Solon, a senior researcher for Air University's China Aerospace Studies Institute, analyzed media reactions within China to the B-21's unveiling in November 2022. One of the more dismissive analyses appeared in the Liberation Army News, which he described as the mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party's Central Military Commission. The writers argued that the B-21 may be strategic blackmail intended to force the kind of expensive and disruptive countermeasures that the Chinese have in fact been forced to take. They also predicted that the B-21 program would not achieve economies of scale due to its astonishing total cost, and therefore it would be difficult to achieve any strategic effect. Other Chinese media outlets also cast doubt on the B-21's affordability and its ability to infiltrate China or Russia's robust high-tech radar and missile defenses. However, not all of them are taking the threat so lightly. Xin Qizi, writing for Chinese National Defense News, wrote that the B-21's main advantage over the B-2 is that the Air Force can afford more of them, and urged readers not to treat the threat lightly. Overall, the US Air Force's assessment that China hopes the US can't afford enough B-21s to make a difference would appear to be correct. Both the US and China seem to have come to the conclusion that it would take a fleet of at least 100 B-21s to pose a considerable threat to China. Officially, the US intends to assemble a fleet of 150 to 200 B-21s by the early 2030s, completely replacing the B-1 and B-2 Spirit stealth bombers currently in service. But how realistic is that? Although the cost of the B-21 prototypes currently being tested has reportedly come in below budget at around $700 million each, some American air power policy experts argue that the Air Force needs to greatly increase its proposed production rate of B-21s to provide their long-range power projection necessary to deter China. Meeting both time and budget deadlines may require doubling the bomber's production rates and reducing unit costs. This would require difficult force structure trades if the Air Force budget remains static, wrote Dr. Christopher J. Bowie, non-resident senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, in a report published March 10, 2023. And that may be easier said than done. A recent article about the promise of the B-21 in the national interest pointed out that an expected cost of $700 million per plane, for a total cost of over $4 billion, the Air Force has already had to scale down what it wants from 300 planes to around 150. The US military is stretched to its breaking point, despite consuming vast amounts of financial resources that the United States can no longer afford to bear. Even with all the money pouring into the elephantine defense establishment, the US defense industrial base is a sclerotic, inefficient mess, according to the article. That is in all likelihood overstating the case somewhat, especially considering that the US is already responsible for a full third of the world's aggregate defense spend, more than all its main rivals combined. However, given recent issues with testing of hypersonic missiles and other R&D setbacks and budget blowouts, it remains to be seen whether the US can bring to fruition the promise of the B-21 by producing enough of them in good time to pose the desired threat. Time will tell. But what do you think? Is the B-21 something the Chinese should be panicking about, or is it going to be a costly white elephant? Please let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and thank you as always for watching the video. Now go and check out US shows China who's top dog in the Pacific, or click this other video instead.